There's not a ton of terms on the board, so it looks like what we'll probably do is we'll cover what we can, and then we'll go and I'll just kind of give you some broad stuff about what I feel like is the most important things that you should study. Sounds good?
Yes.
Sounds like a drum line or something out there. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so as far as I'm aware, there is nothing on here about early 1800s politics, which is 5 out of your 20 questions. So I hope that you have a solid basis. If you look at Alligator Notes, so if you pull out your Alligator Notes, I'm going to cover really quick on kind of the key stuff that I would know from your Alligator Notes. I can't find my copy of Alligator Notes, but I'm going to go based on what I remember from Alligator Notes. Okay, so important things that I would know from your Alligator Notes. Okay, there's 3 really, really big ones that oftentimes get asked about on the AP exam. So the first one is going to be Thomas Jefferson. Okay, biggest thing to know about Thomas Jefferson is he reduced the federal power. Remember, he was an anti-federalist, which means he was what political party? Democratic Republican, good. So he's a Democratic Republican. He believes in small town. Remember, he's a slave owner, so that's kind of a way that you can remember that he's a Democratic Republican, states' rights. But he does sometimes expand the federal power. Some examples we gave was the tariff and the post office. Okay? So just know about Jefferson. The biggest thing with Jefferson is more Hamiltonian, Jeffersonian democracy, which we've already covered. So the next thing that you need to know, and these are the two, really, really big things before the War of 1812. Number one, which is an absolutely must-know, is Marbury v. Madison. Marbury v. Madison. So Marbury v. Madison is, remember, that's going to be the Supreme Court case. You guys remember when we talked about the midnight judges, and John Adams wanted to make sure that he had forever, so he appointed all these judges, and he didn't sign the paperwork in time. Do you guys kind of remember this a little bit? Okay. And so they had this lawsuit. The end of the lawsuit really doesn't matter. What's important is what is known as judicial review, and that is the must-know term, judicial review. Judicial review is the idea that the Supreme Court now has power, and it can determine what is constitutional and what is not constitutional in lawsuits. If it wasn't for the Marbury v. Madison case, we would not have gay marriage in America. We would not have where you guys have your Miranda rights. We wouldn't have where you have to be provided with a lawyer. All those court cases would have never been able to be existent if it wasn't for judicial review. So one that impacts us even until today. The last one that you need to know for this time period is going to be, in general, the starting of westward expansion. This begins with the Lewis and Clark expedition and things like that. Why we begin to move west is a couple of reasons. Number one is trade. Finding goods that we can trade, animals that we could trade, Mississippi River. We also want to be able to understand about these lands. How is our interactions with the natives, making treaties so that people don't die, which actually doesn't work, and we'll talk about some examples of that later on. And then also, this one's really important too, is militarily. Remember, there is one big nation that still has about a third of our current America boundaries, and they own about a third of it on the west coast. What country is that? Spain. Okay? France basically has lost everything at this point. So Spain is over there, and we want to know, are they a threat to us? And if so, how can we possibly defeat them in the future? Easiest way to remember that is remember Lewis and Clark. One of them was an army general, and that's how it kind of helps you trigger memory. Okay, so nothing else on here is early 1800s. Most of this is War of 1812. Okay, well, let's go to War of 1812. So let's give an overall thing of what you need to know on the War of 1812, and we're still on the Alligator Notes if you have those out. So things that you need to know in the War of 1812. Number one, you need to know causes, and most importantly, economics. That's really the key one. If they were to do an LEQ on a causation, it would be economics. Think about it from the British side. Okay, America's not capitalist. They control their trade. What that means is with Britain, if they do something that blocks trade, what is that called? Embargo. Remember the turtle? and we talked about the cutting off of the head. Okay, that's an example to help you remember. So if we institute an embargo, we cut off trade with Britain, right? And so as we start to create these embargoes because we're kind of having some anger issues. Remember, we're also still having like grudges from 40 years ago in the revolution. So we start to kind of cut off trade, things like that. Also with England of why we did this, and this is going into impressment. Remember, England still had a law that said that they could impress our American people even though we were our own free country. So we still had people being taken off the ships and being told you're now a British Navyman because of this law that existed. And so impressment, trade, and embargoes, that's the major causes for America and England. The other cause is going to be with the Non-Intercourse Act. The Non-Intercourse Act, which if they ask you a specific on it, I'd be very, very surprised at those. The Non-Intercourse Act is starting those trade embargoes, and it's also causing blockage of trade. So this is just another economic. You don't necessarily need to know the term itself. You need to more know the general idea of cutting off trade. Does that make sense? You're more likely to see the word embargo than Non-Intercourse Act. Okay? Embargo Act these are the two same ones. So Non-Intercourse Act specifically has to do with naval blockades and also stopping impressment. Embargo Act is going to be the actual start of the embargoes. Okay? But all of these are causes. The Native American cause, though, of this war is going to be these Tecumseh Wars. Okay? Also, the Creek War is a little bit in here. Remember, Tecumseh was a tribal leader. This is going to be in Illinois in Prophetstown. And basically what happens is that they have this vision that they need to get rid of all the Americans. They want to re-ally with the British. So the major cause of Native Americans is allies with the British. Okay? So they want to become allies with the British. They don't like the Americans. Remember, we saw that. Do you remember the Best Friends Forever political cartoon that we looked at? Right? They don't like America. They like Britain. The Tecumseh War breaks out, and that's when you have William Henry Harrison, who's also the guy, remember, he died 30 days after because he got cold and stuff like that. That is that guy because he fought in this battle at Tippecanoe. Basically, it's, again, conflict over land. It's the same thing we've heard about for the last 500 years. Conflict over land causes conflict with natives, which causes us to both hate each other. Okay? So Tecumseh War is going to be a causation for the Native American side. Hit that, hit that, hit that. Okay. Effects of the war. Okay. Major effects of the war. Number one, we failed to take Canada. So that's one of the major ones. It really makes us kind of a shell shock of, wow, America's not perfect. America can't just go take over other people. Other effects of the war, we finally end our negative relationships with Britain. Now we're going to be a lot more positive with each other. We do gain a lot more land out of all of this. And then in terms of a specific end, just like the Treaty of Paris, the Treaty of Ghent ends the war. So the Treaty of Ghent is going to end the war. I saw somebody earlier had Florida and Oregon. That will not be on this quiz. And then Monroe Doctrine will not be on this quiz. We're going to start that actually next class period. Okay.
What's the second things that won't be on this?
Florida and Oregon and Monroe Doctrine. M-O-N-R-O-E. Doctrine. Like James Monroe. Okay, and the last one that's on here for War of 1812 is going to be the Warhawks. Warhawks are going to be pro-war. That's what you need to know for the Warhawks. They're especially going to be very supportive of taking over Canada because they believe that that is like the best possible way to be able to gain American land. Remember, they thought that the Canadians would literally like jump for joy like liberators that the Americans were. They didn't realize they actually liked living in Canada. Yeah.
Were the Warhawks like a community of people or just like who were they?
So the Warhawks are going to be the... It's in the notes, and I don't want to be wrong. I just want Democratic Republicans. I was right the first time. It's the Democratic Republicans. I just wanted to make sure. So the Warhawks are the Democratic Republicans for the most part. The way to remember that is Jefferson moves west. Jefferson's a Democratic Republican. He wants to take over more land of Canada. And I wanted to double check that on notes because I didn't want to be wrong. Because if I do that, it's going to... I had somebody comment on one of the YouTube videos from somebody I didn't even know, and the YouTube video was like a year and a half ago, and they got one thing I said wrong. So now I can't do that again. I didn't even know the person. She's like, I'm from a different school in like Wyoming. I'm like, hello. Welcome to the YouTube channel. Okay, so any questions about War of 1812 before I did? Yeah, it was, I didn't realize that people actually, there's like 5 views on the video. Apparently she joined. So before we move on to market, any questions about War of 1812? I will tell you that there are 5 questions on the War of 1812. 5 questions on early 1800s politics. And then there are 10 questions on the market revolution. Okay? Now in theory, if you were here last class, you should have it. And you should be solid. Okay? That's fingers crossed. Okay? You hope so. So let's go over the main stuff that you need to know. These are on tractor notes. Tractor notes. I know this is a really big packet, so I'm going to go over the big stuff. Okay? So we're going to start with the most important inventions that I would study for the quiz. Tractor notes. If you need another one, they're over in the basket. Okay. So, it's in the very, very bottom one, the ones from last class. Alright, so things that I would know. Number 1, you should know the definition. The biggest thing is economy. What is the impact of these inventions and things like that on the economy? That's really the most important thing. First industrial is just the inventions. The market revolution is how that impacted the economy. Okay? Now, going into the major inventions that I would know, number 1 is the cotton gin. And we did a whole activity on that, right? So remember, the cotton gin before the cotton gin is going to, or before cotton gin, cotton in the South was unprofitable. Remember when we did the activity where you had to like pick out the cotton seeds? Was that a very like efficient way of getting that out? No. And so basically cotton was too expensive. Clothing was too expensive because of this, because it was so costly to produce. Eli Whitney, or allegedly his slave, comes along and they're going to invent the cotton gin. Because of this, cotton production skyrockets, which you would think would mean less slaves, but instead what's going to happen? More slaves. If it wasn't for the cotton gin, slavery might not, that's a big generalization, but a lot of people say that without the cotton gin, slavery might have completely gone out because indigo was gone at this point because we have it from India and stuff like that. So cotton gin, major things, cotton skyrockets, production skyrockets, and with that, unfortunately, slaves skyrocket. Okay? Next important inventions that I would know is I would know interchangeable parts. That is one that is commonly referenced like all the time. So with interchangeable parts, just know that it's basically going to make it a lot cheaper to produce goods because now you don't have to replace the whole thing. The most important one on this entire page is the Lowell system. You need to study the Lowell system. I don't know how I could be more hinting than study the Lowell system. Okay? Lowell system is very important. What minority is it going to most impact? Women. Okay? So remember, these women are going to go to these factory cities that really become model factory systems where people start to say, this is what it should be like, right? Remember, the girls are going to stay in these boarding schools. While at the boarding school, they work, they go to church. They basically do everything the way of Christianity. And that brings us to the last word on here, industrial paternalism, otherwise known as welfare capitalism, and that's a key term. Basically, this is the idea that business owners should treat their employees like family. They should be kind, they should help people, they should provide them good wages and benefits. Basically, this is why dads were willing to send their single daughters to go work in these factories, is because they could trust that they would be treated well and that they would be just like a father to those girls as if they were their own kids. Does that make sense? It's really this fatherly idea of being a good business owner and helping your employees. Okay? Other impacts of the Lowell system, think of the impact of women, especially the draw away from cult of domesticity. That's a really important one. Remember, these factories are in the north. They have to be next to river systems. Good on that one?
The Lowell system takes
It's textile manufacturing. So basically, the cotton's already been produced. At this point, they're actually making the textiles. And then those textiles are typically sent to England, and England makes the clothes because they're better at making the clothes than we are at this point, and then we get it sent back. Once we have in the 1850s, we create a way better sewing machine that can be industrialized, and then we start to make our own clothing. No, because women in the South, their lives are so pampered from being so rich from the cotton crash crops, they don't need the money because they're already going to be wealthy. Plus, in the South, this cult of domesticity thing, there's a lot more movement in the North to break free than in the South. And that lasts a really long time. If you've ever seen the movie Gone with the Wind, there's a reason in Gone with the Wind they are very prim and proper and they don't have to do anything. At this point, women in the North are practically begging for independence. Women in the South are perfectly fine where they're at. I mean, also, there are exceptions, little asterisk, okay, but most of the time it's going to be in the North. I don't know of any specifics of women in the South going north. Okay, next important thing is going to be the Erie Canal. Biggest thing with Erie Canal is going to be trade. It's going to be trade. So really think about how the Erie Canal makes small-town farmers into big world exporters. Basically, they're going to begin mass exporting their corn, their apples. There's a reason why New York is known as the Apple State. It's because they begin to export their apples to other countries. Erie Canal is located in what state, by the way? New York. So New York becomes the commercial hub. It's all about economics. That's really all this is economics. Last one is the telegraph, and that's really big into like technology and things like that. Overall, in terms of the inventions, you will have the opportunity on this to show me what you know about your invention that you did for this class. I did that specifically to assist you from doing a good job on the project. If you choose that section of the quiz, which I'm not giving you any hints. Okay, so other than that, the other things that you need to know on this paper, you need to know agricultural lifestyles in the market revolution. So remember, the North makes the necessary products. That's going to be your food, your clothing, things that you need to survive. The South makes the cash crops, which are going to be your cotton, your indigo, and tobacco. Although at most of this point it's going to be cotton because indigo and tobacco is going to be used in other imperial kingdoms by Britain. Going over in my head. If I were to study certain things overall, I would study the Lowell system. I study the causes and effects of the War of 1812. Those are the two biggest themes I would talk about, and then overall market revolution. Market revolution is more than half really of your test or your quiz. Does anybody have any questions? I covered everything. Yeah.
I guess could you go over just a general idea of what the market revolution caused?
Yeah. So the whole point of why the market revolution occurs is partly because of this switch from mercantilism to capitalism. So after the revolution, we're now able to trade. With that trade, we're now able to make more money. However, we do need inventions. So we begin to have inventions. The first industrial revolution, which is the term for the inventions, begins in England in about 1760. We begin to take some of those ideas, put them into America, and we begin to invent. So a major cause of the market revolution is people invent things. Then in the market revolution, inventions, and then affecting the economy. The major effects, America becomes a major exporter. America becomes self-reliant. People begin to make a lot more money because they're able to be capitalistic. States become known for certain things like Apple State in New York, cotton in the South, and then individual effects of the individual inventions. So why was the Erie Canal important, or why was the cotton gin important? Any more questions? Biggest thing with American Revolution is economics. What was the effect on the economy? Does anybody have any more questions? Yes.
So what was the difference between the Industrial Revolution?
Industrial Revolution invents the objects. I will tell you that most of the time, because most of the inventions were invented in England and then come over to America, most of the time that's going to be a world history. They're mostly going to focus on the market. So the Industrial Revolution invents the things. The market revolution uses those things to impact the economy. So again, first industrial invents the things. Market revolution applies it and changes the economy. And that's a really important difference. The real Industrial Revolution they're going to especially talk about in APUSH is the Second Industrial Revolution, which is like 1800s. Any more questions? Okay, well, if you have some individual questions, come ask me. You have like 7 minutes left in your lunch. Thank you for coming.